20 years ago, I experienced Hurricane Katrina as a resident of New Orleans, Louisiana. At the time, I was living on Julia Street in the downtown warehouse district of the city in a one-bedroom condo in a building called Gallery Row. Just to orient you with the location, the condo was a half-mile west of the river, a half-mile south of the French Quarter, and a mile east of the Superdome. I was living there with my girlfriend at the time in a unit on the 4th floor, which provided easy access to a communal sun deck with a gas grill, lounge chairs, and a small pool. The location was ideal because it was conveniently close to the museum where I worked at the time, which was a mere 1,500 feet away. So my commute to work each day was 5 minutes on foot. As a part of my museum work, I was regularly conducting oral history interviews with World War II veterans, and I recorded these interviews using a Sony PD-150 camcorder with an external microphone and a tripod. The reason that I mentioned the video recording equipment is because that's what made it possible for me to document Hurricane Katrina in a unique way. I started recording just before sunset on Sunday, August 28th, 2005, and continued to do so off and on until the afternoon of Wednesday, August 31st, when we escaped from the city. During those 72 hours, I filled 5 60-minute mini-DV cassettes with footage from before, during, and after Hurricane Katrina. The footage on these 5 video cassettes has only been seen by a handful of people during the last 2 decades. And in honor of the 20th anniversary of the storm, I made this video.
It's large, it's intense, and it's moving relatively fast. And given those 3 factors, a rapid change in direction is just not that likely.
The day was spent on hurricane prep, and by sunset, what the local news was showing looked pretty intimidating. With the eye still 173 miles south of Buras, Louisiana, the weather radar showed a large, intense, and fast-moving storm that was taking up almost the entire Gulf of Mexico. This left no room for doubt. We were in for a major weather event, and it was going to be on top of the city right before dawn. At this point, the forecast track made it look like New Orleans was going to receive a direct hit, so I had the feeling there were only a few hours left. Because of that, shortly before 5 p.m., I decided to go out on the sun deck by the pool to do a little recording. I wanted to document what was about to happen with a little narration, so I dismounted the external microphone and connected it to a 25-foot XLR cable so that I could get in front of the camera like a field reporter. Now, I feel like I should explain something here. The movie Anchorman had come out the year before, and I began riffing on that a little bit as a joke. The movie was still fresh at this point, everything in it was still funny, and so I began doing a bit, kind of like Paul Rudd's character, Brian Fantana, or Vince Vaughn's character, Wes Mantooth. With that being said, here's what happened. All right, we're recording. And 5, 4, 3, 2... Hello, this is your correspondent, Martin Morgan. I'm standing on top of the building at Gallery Row on Julia Street in downtown New Orleans. It's 15 minutes until 5 p.m. on Sunday, August 28th, 2005, and you're beginning to see the first rain squalls coming in from Hurricane Katrina. I will be here throughout the storm to bring you nonstop coverage of the destruction that is sure to follow, so stay tuned. Here it comes. Hey, get them on. And we're also going to be filming some of the people that, like us, have chosen to ride the storm out. We're here with Frank and Dave. What's your full name?
My name's Dave Gibbs.
All right, Dave.
What's up?
What's your full name?
Frank Vrecchio.
All right. Here with Dave.
We're going to drink it on through. Woo!
And this is what you get when you're riding out a Category 5 hurricane in New Orleans, Louisiana. So during the calm before the storm, things were still a little lighthearted, to the extent that Frank and Dave were observing the time-honored tradition of the hurricane party, and I wasn't even really taking things all that seriously, which is why I stayed on the roof and continued filming after sunset. Clouds moving by pretty quick. Basically no rain, a little bit of wind. You know, for the time being, this is not much of a storm. Things are about to change. We know that for a fact. I'm going to get another couple of shots here before we call it. That's
a really nice shot there. When you look at One Shell Square and Place St. Charles, you can see how quickly the wind is moving. I don't know what these people think they're doing right now, but it's 8 o'clock at night with a Category 5 hurricane approaching the city. Unless this is some looting or something, I can't tell what the hell they're up to. I'm trying to get class as much as I can zoom in on the cart, but they look like they're moving with a purpose. They know what they're doing. Maybe I don't, but they do.
When I finally went inside, I filmed a quick tour of the condo's living room and kitchen. This is a quick tour of the house while I was making the call. These are the bookshelves. It's a little bit messy now because I've got stuff sprawled out all over the place. Here's the kitchen. You see a little bit of shooting iron going on there. And then also, I got those two little guys ready.
Oh, the garage.
Just in case, you know. Just in case things. The telephone conversation going on during that shot was about my 2001 Chevrolet Blazer. Under normal circumstances, I parked it in a reserved space in the building's parking lot just around the corner on Magazine Street. The only problem with that was that it was on street level, so there would be trouble if the warehouse district flooded. With that in mind, and with the storm beginning to look like it would score a direct hit on the city, I decided to take the precaution of moving the car to a parking deck 10 blocks away at the Renaissance Père Marquette Hotel on Common Street near the French Quarter. So, at about 10 p.m., just as the rain was beginning to fall, we drove down Camp Street, through Lafayette Square, to Poydras Street, turned right onto Carondelet Street, then left on Common, and finally right into the valet parking area of the Renaissance Père Marquette. The valet eventually drove us back to the condo, but we had to wait about 15 minutes for him. So during that time, I recorded this shot of the Blazer, as well as some footage of Katrina's first rain bands sweeping across the city. We went to bed at about 2 o'clock on Monday morning with the power still on. At about 4 a.m., we woke to very strong winds that physically shook the building. When the winds began to die down shortly before dawn, we went back to sleep, thinking that we had seen the worst of Hurricane Katrina. The rain stopped at about 11 a.m., and I was relieved that the condo had sustained no water or wind damage. In the afternoon, we took a walking tour of the neighborhood. The first stop was the museum, which had sustained very little damage. The worst hit part of the museum campus was a warehouse storing overstock for the museum store, where 2 masonry walls had collapsed, exposing racks of t-shirts, shelves of toys, and, as it turns out, a bunch of American flags.
Marty saves the flag.
There were a few looters there helping themselves to those items, and I even saw a guy run off with an entire rack of baby bomber jackets, which was sort of the first moment of absurdity in an experience that would provide many such moments. In the middle of the strongest winds shortly before dawn, we heard what sounded like an explosion, which, as it turns out, was the collapse of a 19th century masonry warehouse on the north side of the 800 block of Camp Street. When we got there, it was surprising to see bricks completely blocking the street, so I set up the camera and recorded this establishing shot. Then, the guy living in the building at 822 Camp Street invited me to come up to his 3rd floor balcony to get a better shot down on the scene. After I got that shot, I went back down to street level and did another one of my corny field reporter bits.
Is it recording? You speeding? We got speed? Okay, hello. This is Martin Morgan once again, and here we are surveying the scene of destruction wrought by Hurricane Katrina. Well, the time right now, 4:15 p.m. on Monday, August 29th. The storm's now pretty well past us. It blew up through the Pearl River area of Mississippi, and it's proceeded inland. New Orleans is just now beginning to come out from underneath the ruins that this storm has created. And although our house managed the storm quite well, as you can see behind me, the rest of the city has not been so fortunate. What you're looking at here is scene of destruction from the building that's at, it's the 800 block of Camp Street. So that to my left, in this direction here, a few blocks is Poydras Street, then Canal Street in the French Quarter, and then to my right in this direction is uptown New Orleans toward Tulane, Loyola, and then beyond. From what residents have told me, the man that lives across the street from here told me that this thing came down in three phases. That you had subsidence of the masonry structure from second floor and up, and then the rest of the thing just came tumbling down. Looks pretty bad, doesn't it? This is what happens when you combine 100-year-old masonry structure with Category 5 winds. This is what you get. Looks pretty bad. That's right. That's what happens. Folks coming out, beginning to take a look around.
Pause. While I was doing my dorky reporter impression, I could tell that somebody had walked up and was standing just out of frame to my right. The guy started to speak to me, so I began to interact with him in response. And that opened the door to what might be the weirdest interaction I had during my Hurricane Katrina aftermath story. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Edward May.
What do you think about this, man? How about that? Where'd you stay during the storm?
This is about what trying to put a problem, but everything it's kind of to be, everything gonna be all right.
Yeah. So what's your name?
My name is Edward May.
All right, hey man, congratulations.
Edward May.
Edward May.
Yeah.
All right, Edward. Congratulations. Where'd you stay during the storm?
I've been from here.
Oh, you're in Hosanna, man?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm over there.
Cool. Wow.
It's good to win for Carolina.
Yeah.
But
How about that?
it's not very because it's about Wednesday, but it's gonna be all right. That's not very bad for the problem. It's probably focusing the problem. We don't a lot of people focus on the problem.
So did you get scared during the storm at any point?
No, but let's just say everybody it's okay. I'm all right. You all right. But upstairs could be all right because Hurricane Carolina, But just hang in there. But the whole lot of reason for the just like the matter, I could be okay. But it's gonna be all right. I see one thing though about but I could just shut up with them. I could just try to put my point of view now. It's just like be a type of the wind problems, it's not a solved problem because of that problem. It's a waste of my problem now. But I want about everything to be all right though. Now that's best to be kind of type of situation because I got problems with that problem. But it's gonna be okay though. That's right. Yeah, but my first time on television.
You look good. All right. Well, now you've heard it, folks, from Edward May at the Hosanna Men. Thank you, Edward. Best of luck to you, man.
What team crew you are?
We're just out here filming destruction, just getting a sense of the damage to the city.
Named to New Orleans.
Yeah.
I've been here a long time.
All right, Edward May, thank you very much. Good luck to you, man. Hang in there. Take care.
You too.
And there you have it from another New Orleans resident who has survived the storm, Mr. Edward May from Ozanam Inn here on Camp Street in downtown New Orleans. All right, and we're going to continue surveying this damage and the other damage that you find. And just for the record, I have no idea of anything he just said. I didn't understand a single word. Did you? Okay. Well, we're going to sign off for now. We'll pick up and go to another location and continue filming as we continue to document the destruction from Hurricane Katrina.
From there, we walked down St. Charles Avenue, where a few industrious individuals were already beginning to clean up storm debris. That's where I spotted a boarded up window that offered the message, "Go east, Katrina." When we reached Lafayette Square, I delivered another roving reporter stand-up. Hello and welcome back. This is Martin Morgan once again, and I'm coming to you from Lafayette Square in the Central Business District of downtown New Orleans, Louisiana, where Hurricane Katrina has come through and wrought a great deal of destruction, evidence of which you can see behind me. The time is 5 minutes until 5 p.m. on Monday, August 29th, 2005. New Orleans has just endured a very, very close call from Category 5 Hurricane Katrina. Now, what you're seeing is a great deal of evidence of downed trees, broken glass, and other destruction here in New Orleans, but what you're not seeing is the important part. You're not seeing the flooding that everyone had expected to see. Thankfully, the city of New Orleans has been spared an inundation. We're going to continue our roving report from downtown New Orleans, Louisiana, so please stay tuned. Thank you. At this point, I had no idea that the levees had already failed and that the city was beginning to flood. The reason I was unaware of this was because the neighborhood where I lived was close to the river levee, and so there was never a problem there. I was going to find out the reality of this situation soon enough, though. When we left Lafayette Square, we went right back to the condo, and I went back out on the sun deck to record one last stand-up for the day. Hello once again, Martin Morgan, signing off with the last transmission for tonight, Monday, August 29th, 2005. As you can see behind me, the scene here in New Orleans is much different from what it was 24 hours ago. At 7 p.m. yesterday, things looked very menacing. We were beginning to see the first feeder bands coming ashore of Hurricane Katrina, which passed not directly over New Orleans, but just immediately to the east of New Orleans, made landfall shortly before dawn today, and then continued inland. As you can see, the night has ended up being rather pleasant. The storm is completely gone, and we're left to clean up the debris and pick up the aftermath. Thank you. I was a little too ready to declare this crisis at an end, and that was mainly because I wasn't receiving news reports, and because of that, had no way of knowing what had happened to the levees. As the sun set on August 29, 2005, Katrina seemed like nothing more than a near miss. It didn't seem like things were about to spin out of control. It didn't seem like the storm had carved a trauma into the heart of the city. It didn't seem like the storm was about to give the country something to argue about for years to come, but that's exactly what was about to happen. I started the day on the roof with this shot of the NBC Nightly News remote van on the Greater New Orleans Bridge. About 2 hours before this, we woke to a ringing telephone. Surprisingly, mobile phones were useless, and yet the landline remained on for the duration of the ordeal. The people who were calling began telling us of the scenes of destruction that were being played on every television station. This is when we first learned of the breaches in the levee system and the looting. When emergency radio broadcasts confirmed this information, we began to worry for the first time. Strangely, we weren't hearing any details on the radio about the situation in downtown New Orleans. All we knew was that our family and friends living outside the city were telling us that the levees had been breached and that the looting had begun. Based on those sobering reports, I made a decision to make an attempt to get out of the city. I knew the Blazer was fine because, after all, it's in a parking deck. And I knew that it would have plenty of gas in it because I had taken the precaution of filling up the gas tank 3 days earlier. So in the afternoon, we set out on foot for the Renaissance Père Marquette, hoping to retrieve the car and drive ourselves out. On this first attempt to get the Blazer, I carried the Sony PD-150. Right, here we are, Poydras Street, downtown New Orleans. Day after the hurricane. Widespread looting overnight. Rumors that levees are going to break. Rumors that we won't have power for a month. Lots of rumors. Since this was the first time we had gone into the core of the Central Business District, we were surprised at the sight of broken glass filling the streets and trees down everywhere. At Poydras Street, I recorded a convoy of National Guard dump trucks and Humvees escorted by NOPD cruisers and an NOFD fire truck passing in what felt like an unplanned parade. At the intersection of Poydras and Carondelet, I got my first look at the flooded streets of the CBD while recording a couple of women struggling to pull grocery carts full of loot over the streetcar tracks.
That's where we gotta go, right there.
At 407 Barone Street, I recorded some footage of a car that had been crushed under a pile of bricks that had fallen from the third floor of a building that's now a restaurant called Pizza Luna. Then I caught something interesting on camera. An interaction between a National Guardsman sitting on top of a Stewart & Stevenson M1078 LMTV and a New Orleans resident standing in the shade of an awning on the building at 346 Barone.
What's that? You want to ride to the dome? That's what we're taking. To the dome? The way to the West Bank is open. I have no idea. I don't know.
Beyond that point, we were wading in a soup of dead pigeons, dead rats, sewage, and oil, all mixed in about 3 feet of water. We didn't want to go in it, but if we wanted to get the blazer, we had to. So in we went. When we finally reached the Renaissance Père Marquette, we found that the garage doors were down and locked, and the entire area was under thigh-deep water. 3 looters walked by right at that exact moment, one of which was carrying a brand new football, and the other was pushing a bicycle while wearing a life preserver. Realizing that there was no chance of getting the blazer out of the garage, we sloshed down Common Street to its intersection with Carondelet Street. The footage that I recorded while crossing that intersection really shows you what the CBD looked like after the levees broke.
Car's down there.
Pushing onward from there, I noticed an NOPD officer with an Ithaca Model 37 Featherlight DS Police Special 12-gauge shotgun dealing with a looter I had seen at the museum the day before. So I started recording some of their interaction from across the street.
He was going through his bags of stuff.
Then, at the intersection of Common and St. Charles Avenue, I started filming a group of NOPD officers who didn't seem to want to be on camera. From there, we went directly back to the condo. The entire experience of being in downtown in the middle of all of that drama was very distressing and very troubling. Until then, we'd only heard rumors of the general lawlessness that had taken over the city. Now that we'd seen it close up, we realized what a chaotic situation we were in. Just after 7 p.m., I returned to the roof deck and recorded another spectacular sunset shot that a helicopter flew through the middle of as if we had planned it. August 30th had been a crazy day that had proven to me we needed to get out. There were even more military and civilian aircraft filling the sky than the day before, so I recorded some footage of it. A U.S. Coast Guard C-130, a civilian Bell 206 helicopter, and a Black Hawk.
This guy's new here. I hadn't seen him in the last couple of days. It's been a lot like Mogadishu around here. We've had a lot of Army, Louisiana Air National Guard, Black Hawks zipping about.
There were lots of people moving around the neighborhood on foot, most of them walking toward the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center, where I would later find out thousands of people had gathered. But the primary shelter of last resort was the Louisiana Superdome that had about 30,000 people in it since before the storm, so eventually I turned the camera toward that part of downtown. There were still people moving around the neighborhood on foot, in some cases away from the convention center, like these guys slowly making their way up St. Joseph Street. But I began noticing a large number of vehicles streaming out of the warehouse district by driving down Magazine Street and crossing the bridge to the West Bank. Seeing these things only reinforced the urgency to get out of town. But to do that, we were going to need a car. So the plan was to return to the Père Marquette with a pair of bolt cutters to open the doors to the parking deck, find the Blazer, and then drive out using the same route everyone else was using that morning. After what we'd been through in the CBD the day before, I wanted to move quickly, without distraction. So I decided to leave the video camera behind. Because of that, I have no footage of what happened next. We walked down Magazine through Lafayette Square, crossed Poydras, and continued onward to the corner of Common Street, where we had encountered the NOPD the day before. We entered the flooded area on Common between St. Charles Avenue and Carondelet. When we reached the Père Marquette, I was surprised to find the doors to the parking garage were up and open, so we started walking up the ramps from one floor to the next. After climbing 10 floors, I finally spotted the Blazer in a back corner because I had a miniature flashlight that I carried in my backpack, along with a few other items, if you know what I mean. To this day, I remain in astonished disbelief over the fact that all 4 windows were down, the valet key was in the ignition, and the vehicle still had a full tank of gas. We both dove in, I cranked it up, and we felt air conditioning for the first time in 3 days. I then drove down all the ramps we had just walked up and followed signs to the exit for the parking deck. Although you enter that deck from the valet drop-off for the hotel on Common Street, the exit is on Carondelet Street, which was of course flooded. I stopped briefly at the parking deck exit just because the water looked too deep for the car. But it's not like I had any choice. I had to chance it. So I plunged in. From that spot to Canal Street, which was high and dry by the way, was a mere 350 feet, which I would have covered in just a few seconds under normal circumstances. But there was about 3 feet of water in Carondelet for about 200 feet, so I barely gave it enough gas to keep the vehicle moving very slowly. This took about 30 seconds, and while the car was moving through the water, an NOPD officer who was standing outside of the flooded zone in the middle of Canal Street saw me coming and began to signal for me to stop. To this day, I have no idea why he wanted me to stop the car in the water, but that's what he wanted, so I did it, reluctantly. He put his right hand on his Glock and cursed me out worse than I have ever been cursed out in my entire life. He said something about sightseeing at one point, so I guess that means he was under the impression that we were out driving around to look at storm damage. I had no choice but to sit there and take it from him until he finally ran out of profanity and told me to get out of his face. I then went down Canal, turned right onto Magazine Street, and went straight to the condo. We were both in disbelief that we had actually gotten the car out of the deck, through the floodwaters, and past the NOPD officer, who was clearly not dealing with the stress of the situation well. As we pulled up in front of Gallery Row, I told her, let's go upstairs, grab the bare necessities, and then get out of here. When I walked into the living room, I noticed the camera on the tripod sitting in the corner. So I turned it on and rolled tape on the next few minutes of packing.
All right, everybody, just so you know, we were successful at getting the car out, and we're hitting the road right now. I almost got arrested. The cop called me a fucking asshole. It was awesome, but I got the car out, and that's all that matters, and it's got its gas in it still, and we're getting the hell out of here. We're going to Houston, Texas.
Oh, that's more.
Awesome.
No, I don't.
All right, gang, this is it. We're just about packed. It's time to break the camera down and pack her away, too. We're about to hit the road and head to Houston, Texas. We'll pick this back up when we're crossing the Greater New Orleans Bridge. That ought to be a pretty interesting scene of destruction. All right, so stay tuned.
We then moved everything downstairs using a fire exit stairwell that opened up to the outside through the door with the red sign on it. Once everything had been tossed into the Blazer, I drove up Julia Street and turned left on Magazine.
Escape from New Orleans. What's that mean?
What do you mean?
Slow down for the bookies.
What do you mean?
Slow down for the bookies.
Shit ain't flooded, is it?
No.
At the intersection of Calliope Street, I turned right, but then immediately left onto the entrance ramp for the G&O Bridge.
Driving. I'm telling me. Hey, Asian dude. Good luck to you.
Don't see much. Some houses are a little
Look at
messed up.
these people walking across the G&L.
Hell yeah.
Dude's got his damn water. See if we see anybody we know.
I got room for none. Come on. Get me out of here. This war zone.
Keep your eye out for anybody we know.
There were people walking across the G&O to the West Bank as we crossed it, and I later heard the Gretna police began turning the pedestrians back, but that's not what we saw.
Nice healthy speed.
I'm gonna coast while I can.
Yeah. Trying to get the hell to somewhere where they're not gonna die.
Hey, get a shot of me driving?
Here's Marty driving.
God, these people have walked all the way across the New Orleans Bridge.
Nobody tried to stop me as I followed Highway 90 through Gretna, then Marrero, and then Avondale. At Booty, I got onto I-310, crossed the Mississippi River again,
Not being a
and then got on the I-10 westbound right by the airport. After that, it was Baton Rouge, followed by Lafayette, Lake Charles, and eventually the Texas state line.
Welcome to Texas.
Get
We
the
got
big
it.
star. Welcome to the Lone Star State.
The big adventure finally came to an end when we reached Houston at about 8 o'clock that night. So here I am, 20 years later, looking back on my big 2005 Hurricane Katrina misadventure. What do I make of all of it? Well, I have just spent the last 20 years of my life enduring endless, unsolicited political opinions from people who were not in the 504 area code between August 28th and September 1st, 2005. I have friends who lived in houses that were flooded during Katrina, and they then spent 2 years living in a trailer in their own driveway while the house was gutted and repaired. I have friends who lost everything during that storm. If you want a political opinion about Hurricane Katrina, go find one of them. Pay no attention to everyone else. I hope you enjoyed the footage. It's been sitting in my gun locker for the past 20 years. Only a few people have seen it. And a word about that. As you can tell from my footage, in 2005 I was a gun owner. I still am that to this very day. I remember Hurricane Katrina like it was yesterday. And because of that, I will never be without a firearm for the rest of my life. It's that simple.